Good morning, everyone. I must admit this is a broad theme, and I had to think long and hard, like a previous speaker, about what aspects I actually wanted to cover today. And I decided in the end I want to give you something to take away with you, something to reflect on. So after my introduction, I'm going to make this presentation really about you and your research and ways to improve it. The first question is, what is digital scholarship? What do we mean when we talk about digital scholarship? Well, in a nutshell, it's the new way in which scientists, researchers, scholars collaborate with one another and put their research out into the public domain. A lot has changed in the last 30 years with the rise of the internet, and digital scholarship is the new form of scholarly communication and dissemination. So we know that technology has changed higher education the world over. We know in teaching and learning technology has had a huge impact, but it's also had a big impact in terms of research. It's changed the manner in which we as academics engage with each other and with the public. And it's changed the way in which information and publications are presented and are available. 20 years ago, before the internet, publications, academic publications, were housed in journals, which largely were subscribed to by libraries and were accessible mainly to scholars and students. Today, with the rise of open access, with the rise of the online movement, we are able to transcend the academic domain and bring research back into the publicly accessible domain. So increasingly, the general public is able to access research articles which, for whatever reason, they may be interested in. And let's remember that at the end of the day, it's taxpayers' money that funds research the world over. So this is very important. So who is this new connected scholar? What do we look like? Well, increasingly we're using new technologies to communicate with each other and engage in wider global networks. Now, if you went to a conference 30 years ago, that was your big chance to make contacts for the year, to engage, meet people, and to collaborate. And you'd normally have to decide after listening to a few papers who it was specifically that you thought you could maybe collaborate with, and then angle in on them during lunchtime and wait to make sure they didn't have their mouth full of food and then start a conversation. That was the way scholars met up with other scholars. You'd maybe publish something in a journal, and if somebody really liked it, they could write you a letter. That was the reality 30 years ago. Well, a lot has changed. It's instant. We can communicate with other scholars instantly. We can email them. We can follow them. We can see every day what they have to say. And we're seeing the rise as well amongst this of branding amongst academics. Some people are better at it than others, and some people are obviously prominent academics than others. But we talk nowadays about certain academic rock stars who are able to have not only a huge audience of scholars, but the general public as well. And by way of example, I refer to Professor Pierre de Vos at the University of Cape Town, our local law professor in South Africa, constitutional law. He has a very good blog called Constitutionally Speaking. He has almost 21,000 followers on Twitter. I have to say, for a law professor, I think that's pretty impressive. Okay, so what does digital scholarship mean for us here in Africa? Well, currently, Africa's contribution to world science, in other words, in terms of research projects and research publications, is around 1.3% of total global scientific output. Aside from the fact that in many African countries there are systemic constraints on the research systems, we also face a problem when we submit papers to prominent international journals. There is an acknowledged bias in favor of researchers in the developed world. Well, most journals would like to publish the majority of their articles from people at places like Harvard University or Oxford University. So you face an institutional bias as well. And then, if you don't publish in English, you face a further hurdle in terms of getting your information into the best journals. So you as a researcher here in South Africa, faced with additional challenges that perhaps researchers in the Northern Hemisphere don't necessarily face. However, digital scholarship and open access provides us, researchers in the developing world, with a unique opportunity for the first time to really collaborate with other scholars anywhere in the world and to increase the impact and visibility of our research through open access publishing. Just a quick graph there. You can see Africa's scientific trends. Actually, this is almost for the last 30 years. And I'm sad to say that picture hasn't changed much at all. So in sub-Saharan Africa, we're producing about 0.5% of the world's research, and it's about 93% of that 0.5 is here from South Africa. So what can I as a researcher do to harness the power of Web 2.0? Just for those of you who are unclear, Web 2.0 is the section of the internet, the second section of the internet, basically that came along about 10 years after the start of the internet, which enables you to interact on the internet, to upload data, to share, to communicate with people, etc. So probably the most of us, the first Web 2.0 interaction we had was with Facebook. But it's Web 2.0 is much bigger than that now, and we use it for all sorts of things, to share photos, you name it, we're busy doing it. So I would advise you, and at this point, to stop and reflect and ask yourself, do I have a clear strategy for my research? Or what am I actually doing? Because I can tell you from where I'm sitting that the university basically communicates to us, if you're at this level, we expect you to have a minimum of 1 accredited article per year. If you're at this level, we expect you to have 2 accredited articles per year. That is most people's strategy. I must get this article out. There's not so much thinking about where do I want it to go, who would I like to be reading it, how would I like to link into existing research, and who would I like to work with in the future? These are the questions you actually need to be asking yourself. You need to think a little bit bigger than achieving that minimum output and punching your ticket and saying, okay, I've done that for the year, so I'm on par. That might be what your institution expects from you, but it's not necessarily where you would be in terms of self-actualization as a researcher. So you need to think about a strategy. And I've basically, nowadays it is a web-based strategy, divided it into 4 steps. This is not to say this is the way it would work for you, but I think it would be generally probably the way to go. The first is to retool your online profile, and obviously if you don't have an online profile, to get one as soon as possible. Step 2, to begin sharing and uploading all your research outputs onto open platforms, including your previously unpublished papers and presentations. You've heard now about your university's repository. That is a great place to go and deposit research that you've already done. Step 3, refine your future publication strategy with your impact in mind. We'll get to impact later. And include open access, both green and gold. Step 4, once you've published your research, disseminate it and then engage and collaborate. So, some key technologies for research. In order to build your networks effectively, you must have a robust and dynamic online presence. Dynamic means changing, remaining current, remaining updated. SEO, what am I talking about there? Search engine optimization. In other words, when each search engine like Google has a way of filtering sites and picking up a site and boosting it to the top. So some sites don't get picked up as easily by Google and Bing as other sites do. So you need to pick sites to put your research and your profile on, that when somebody does a web search on your name, Google picks it up quickly and puts it on your first page of results. That's what we call search engine optimization. So affordances of technologies. Affordances means basically what can that technology do for you? What can you achieve with it? Well, as you'll see, most of them have a number of affordances, and this is why it's good to pick a mixture of technologies, but not so many that you're battling to manage. So you're looking at some key affordances in terms of marketing, in terms of creating awareness and dissemination, in terms of sharing your research, collaborating with other researchers, and then quite importantly, something most of us neglect, impact assessment. Okay, so step 1, your profile is your brand. We talk increasingly about personal brands. Now, I would recommend that you choose at least one of these platforms to place your profile on. I'm assuming that 90% of this audience are already on LinkedIn. It is a South African standard. It's very popular in this country. In the United Kingdom, for example, only 30% of academics are on LinkedIn, but most of them are on either ResearchGate or academia.edu. But in terms of South Africa, I'm taking it as a given you're on LinkedIn, and that's not really what I'm talking about when I'm talking about your academic brand. I'm saying pick one of the other 4, at least one, to put your academic profile up on. ResearchGate, known for being a little bit more user-friendly to people in the hard sciences, engineering, physics, that type of thing, and great for collaborating. Academia.edu, very popular with people in the human sciences, social sciences, business sciences. Mendeley, as we know, a big referencing site, and I know Danielle is going to be talking a bit about later. Google Scholar fills its own little niche because it offers you profiling bibliometrics. So in essence, when you've got your profile up, what is it that you're wanting people to see quickly? Where you work, what your interests are, and some of the things that you've published, and then they must be able to contact you. So we'll be talking later in the workshop about academia.edu. Now, once you've got your profile up, you need to create it, obviously, first, and then you need to maintain it. So a basic first step would be go and Google yourself before you start and see what comes up. I can tell you some people have gotten horrible surprises when they've Googled themselves. Because firstly, there's that pesky little thing on Google called images, which most of us don't go and click on. Okay, but other people do. And under images, everybody who's ever been to a party with you and taken a photo of you has tagged you and put it up somewhere on images. There's all sorts of things there that maybe you wouldn't want to see. So you need to go and sort through that. And if it's embarrassing, get rid of it. Ask somebody to untag you, whatever. Then you actually need to look at your Google profile. You should own your first page of results. In other words, they should all be about you in your professional setting, other than maybe your Facebook link, which would also pop up. It's a good idea to constantly Google your profile at least once a month. We recently had a professor in my faculty whose students thought it was a big joke to put his profile up on a dating site. And they included a list of various fetishes that he supposedly had, and they went and they put this up, and he happened to Google himself and he found this, and he was very upset. And I can tell you something, his wife was even more upset. So it took us quite a while to actually convince the site that it wasn't him, and we were able to trace back to the computer the offending IP address where it came from. It was indeed from the computer labs, but this, well, you know, can happen to you. Anything can happen to you on the internet, so be aware of what's out there about you. Then keep a common identity across your various platforms. I'm not talking about Facebook, I'm talking in the professional sense. Be the same person in those platforms. Don't have a picture of your dog as your profile on LinkedIn and then maybe your cat on academia.edu. People do that, but it's you know, when we refer to professionalism, that's what we talk about. And then link all your profiles through to one another. For example, LinkedIn, you can embed your SlideShare presentations and announces to people when you've got a SlideShare presentation that's new. So, in other words, your various audiences are becoming aware of this. Okay, I've just been told to watch my time, so I'm going to have a look at sharing your research. Now, so this is step 2. So, I would advise you to upload your research to your institutional repository wherever possible. And you can, on sites like ResearchGate as well, publish some negative data from your experiments, which is a very good idea to do. Once you've uploaded research, even old research that you've uploaded, be sure to go and make that announcement on your social networking site for academics and tell people, I've just published this paper, or I've uploaded this paper into a repository. And then after a conference, remember, okay, thanks, thank you. After a conference, please remember to go and share your presentation on SlideShare or Prezi. It's quite important because, you know, when you go to a conference, maybe 50 people listen to you and they enjoy what you've said, and you go away feeling very ebullient and this was all very great. And, you know, a week later, truthfully, they've forgotten about it. They're back in their world rushing around, you're back in yours. By uploading your stuff to SlideShare, they can go and look at it later down the line if they want to. But so can a global audience access that. And people can see you're busy, you're getting places, you're doing things. So market yourself. Don't be ashamed to market yourself. We can see Daniela, if I must apologize for this, but she's been busy, you can see, and there's an example of SlideShare and how she's uploaded all her recent presentations on SlideShare. Now, step 3, your publication strategy. Okay, so as I've already mentioned, the South African science system, by that I mean higher education, science production, knowledge production, is over-focused on publication as the pinnacle of research production. So your institution is very happy once you've published, because for your institution, that means a relatively good government subsidy per article. They rely heavily on this money. But this isn't the end game for you. This is actually maybe halfway through the whole process. You also need to choose journals which are going to showcase your work effectively. Now, I think the Department of Education has, it's in the region of 200 journals which are accredited. There's some international ones and some South African journals. And if you publish in any one of those accredited journals, then your institution receives a subsidy at the end of the year. We call it the DOE list of accredited journals. Now, the problem with many of those journals, especially in the South African context, is that they are relatively obscure. They have a print run of less than 1,000, of which most go to libraries. So you have to ask yourself this question: who's reading my research? And if nobody's reading your research, and if nobody's using your research, then you have to ask yourself, why did I even do that? It's quite a painful process to go through. So you need to choose your journals very carefully. Now, a lot of South African journals are now getting onto the platform African Journals Online, which, like Cielo, which is the department, actually initially a Brazilian initiative, the Department of Science and Technology has come onto it. These two big platforms are increasingly showcasing and housing South African journals, which are now online. So they're still accredited. You're still going to get your subsidy, but people all over the world can now search for information, and results from your work are going to pop up. If a journal that you're publishing in has no reach, think about putting your research somewhere else. You need to recognize the importance of citations and citation impact. A citation is when somebody quotes you in their research and publishes that research. And institutions and funders put a lot of emphasis on citations because it basically shows the reach and usefulness of your research. So sharing is the key to success. And this is the other thing that you need to think about. Collaboration is really, really important. To work with groups of researchers multiplies your reach. Let's say, for example, you publish a paper with somebody in Germany, and he's got a social network and you've got a social network. Not only will the people that you know and who are interested in your stuff follow that research, but so will his whole group of followers and network. If you work with 4 researchers, you're quadrupling your reach. Also, when you collaborate with people, we know this, it's much easier to get your work into foreign journals if you collaborate with a foreign author. That's just the way the game is played. Digital bibliometrics, just quickly, bibliometrics, the science of research impact, if I can put it quickly. In the past, only a few select universities worldwide had centres that dealt with bibliometrics and have this information. Stellenbosch has such a centre, but now you can measure your own impact because Google Scholar, Impact Story, and academia.edu to a less extent, it has something we call research analytics, but the first two have bibliometrics. And they show you who's using your data, where they're from, and how often your data has been cited. So you need to have a look at those tools so that you can understand where, in the fields that I'm working, where am I having the most impact. Lastly, I think this is something for the future, an ORCID ID. I think it's going to become very prominent. It's a unique number that's assigned to each researcher. The uptake of ORCID this year in Europe has been huge, and increasingly journals are asking for your ORCID number when you submit an article. What it means is that even if you are John Smith and there's 12,000 other scholars called John Smith, your research will never be confused with theirs again because you have this unique identifier now. If you get married, if you get divorced, your name changes, you also takes care of that problem. Just quickly, a look at Google Scholar's bibliometrics. You can see here Johan Mouton, look at his articles, and it'll tell you cited by how many people and what the year of publication was. Interestingly, look at the last 2 publications. The one is in English, the one is in Afrikaans. It's exactly the same book. But the English one gets 605 citations and the Afrikaans one 96. This is what I was talking about, bias towards English language publishing. So you need to be aware of such factors when you do research. Quick look at Impact Story. It's a relatively new website, but it's very much into moving with the whole open access movement. It's got good government and institutional buy-in, and it gives you wonderful bibliometrics. It's a bit of work to set it up in the beginning, but in the long run, it's going to be more than worth it to you. Okay, lastly, dissemination for increased research impact. We're shifting away from a world where the journal industry sits between the academic and the audience. We're now moving to a world that's more reflective of social media, where you, the academic, is becoming the key node of distribution and research. So it's now for you to push your research and get it out to the public domain. You no longer have to worry about, well, how many people actually read this journal. You have the power to put your research out there. So you need to announce it. You need to upload it as soon as you can to institutional repositories or onto any kind of open access platform as soon as you may do that. And then spread the good news. Put it on your social networking sites. Tweet about it. If you're not really au fait with Twitter yet, it doesn't matter. Use your social networking to let people know, I've published a new paper, I've uploaded a new paper. And remember to engage with those who comment on your research, be it positive or negative. Just keep it professional. It doesn't matter if somebody doesn't like what you said. It's better than getting no reaction at all. Just a quick example there from this academic. He announces, I've just been to this university to do this, that, and the next thing. Let people know what you're up to. It keeps you in mind. You know the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. Parting thoughts. Your web presence is an exercise in consistency. You need to work at this. You need to keep your sites current. And I suppose once every 10 years, you probably do need to upload the more recent pictures of yourself, that kind of thing. Okay. The power of social networking lies in economies of scale. Well, if you have 2 followers and you're following 2 people, your experience is going to be quite limited. Start by following people that really interest you. And follow a number of people. The same with Twitter. It's a common tactic. And then interact with them. Interact in comments where you can add something of value. Take it slowly in the beginning, but realize the more you interact and the more people are in your circles, the bigger your reach will grow. Social networking is a gift economy. Really important. Give freely. People often now put their papers out on something like academia and say, would people peer review this for me before I submit it to a journal, please? Take the time to peer review somebody's paper. They will give that back to you down the line. Lastly, just keep working away at it. Start on a relatively low curve. It's going to grow and you will reap the benefits. Thank you.
Thank you.